Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to today's CHRO South Africa webinar. I see a few familiar names coming through, but for those of you who don't know me, my name is Nick Smith from CHRO South Africa. I am putting a message in the chat bar. If everyone could please let us know where you are from and what your job title is. There we go. Thanks, Jeannie. So pretty much what Janine's been doing. Thanks, Janine. I would like to encourage everyone to ask as many questions as possible during the session, which we will endeavor to answer in sort of the last 15 minutes or so at the end of the session. We probably won't be able to answer them all in this session, but we will ensure that all questions are answered, and we will send you a personal mail in the coming week with your answers. Okay, so I think let's get going. It is with great pleasure that I introduce today's speaker, Sally Acton, who is one of CHRO South Africa's valued partners. Sally is the Managing Director of Talk Solutions and will be talking around mapping your employee journey. It's been really cool working with Sally. She is an absolute expert in her field, and we are in for a treat, sorry, for the next 40 minutes. So without further ado, Sally, over to you.
Thanks, Nick. Morning, everybody. I must tell you that this is the first webinar I've ever done. I've done a few chats in public, but this is the first one that I've ever done in my slippers. So, but I'm looking forward to it, and I hope that you'll enjoy the presentation this morning and that you'll have lots of questions for me at the end. Great, so let's get on with it. So I'm going to be talking to you today about the employee journey and how you should be mapping it. But first, let me give you a little bit of intro about us and about me. My name is Sally, as Nick said, and I'm the MD of a company called Talk. And we've been around for 11 years, so a little bit over a decade, and we're an employee experience consultancy. We work in and around Southern Africa, and we believe we have the best jobs in the world, basically. Below on the screen, you can see a couple of the clients that we work with. We're very fortunate to work with great clients who have an unbelievable attitude towards employee experience. So we really are very, very lucky. And we come from a place where we work with a system called belief, purpose, and pursuits. And the reason why I'm touching on this today is just because I think that in the professions that you're all in, is that you believe probably what we believe, that businesses have the power to maximize human potential. And our purpose as Talk is to connect the organizations to all of the people that work for them and to make their employee experience truly amazing. So speaking of employee experience, I'm going to do a little bit of theory before we get into the actual employee journey. You'll also note that I talk excessively with my hands. That's just kind of how it goes, so apologies for that. Employee experience is, by definition, the sum of what people encounter, observe, or feel during the course of their employment at your company. And it's incredibly important in the business case for it, which is something that we get asked a lot, is that it actually has a rands and cents effect on your business. Companies with great employee experience achieve generally twice the innovation, double the customer satisfaction, and a 25% higher profit. Employee experience came from its big brother, which was customer experience. And as you know, customer experience has been quite the buzzword for the last few years. And I believe that you can't have a great customer experience if you don't have a superb employee experience. If you look at your customer journey and you see all the different entry points and you see all the great work that's done to attract and retain your customers, but as soon as they interact with the employees of the company who are not engaged, that entire experience gets disconnected, and the customers can feel that. Because after all, we're all people, and we can feel when another human is not engaged and not passionate about what they do. So I think that Deloitte said it really, really well when they said, although employee experience is taken from customer experience, it's very different. employees have a long-term personal relationship with their employers. Customers can walk away at any point in time. They can give you your 30-day notice or 60 days, and they can stop buying your product at any time. But as an employee in an organization, you are hopefully in it for a slightly longer run than that. The employee experience is also very social. It's built around the culture of the organization and the relationship that you as an employee have with the other people in your team. It's not just about your individual needs, it's also about the interactions that you're having with everybody else. And third, which is my favorite point, employees are not a set of transactions. They're not a sum of all the touch points. They want to have a career, they want to have a purpose, and they want their jobs and their lives to have meaning. So employee experience is based on very, very, very much a psychological engagement. So if we look at that and we summarize it down, employee experience is complex and layered. It's not something that is simply a linear path. It is affected constantly by the interactions that employee has. And those interactions are with customers, they're with managers, they're with each other, and they're with the organization as a whole. And it is deeply connected to psychological well-being. And this is one of the points that I'm going to go into. The theory is important, even though it's not as interesting as the journey. It is very important to understand the basis of it. So I'm going to talk to you quickly now about social exchange theory. And social exchange theory is based on the principle that there is a voluntary exchange between individuals. So in the context that we're looking at it between the employer and the employee. And we're saying that the relationship and the value that an employee feels is really like a cost analysis. The employee has a look at all of the benefits, at the actual remuneration, and at the tangible and intangible assets that they're given during the time of their employment. And they work out basically, is it worth it for me? What's in it for me? It's that old sales thing of what's in it for me. So when an organization offers tangible and intangible resources, plus the benefits, which are not just financial benefits, it's things like recognition, things like reward, things like support, care, well-being, benefits in terms of their health and wellness. When the sum total of those elements is worth it for the employee, they will respond in kind back to the organization. It is important to note as well that the employee also has a look at where this is going to go. So if you have a look at people that earn large salaries, they still leave their employment because their social exchange theory is not adding up for them. If they take what they're getting paid, if they take the benefit package that they're on, if they take how they are experiencing the satisfaction of their work and where they have to go in the future and what that looks like, that you'll still find that some people will leave their current employment because it's just not worth it for them. The actual cost that they perceive is too high for them to stay where they are, and that's why they move on. So if we look at social exchange theory, it's built around four main pillars, and that is perceived organizational support, which is really the well-being, the recognition, the job enrichment that they receive at the organization. So it's really their socio-emotional needs that are being met and their perception of that need being met. And then we have a look at their career goal development, which is really, that's their promotions, that's their increasing pay, and that's their skills development. And then we have a look at the empowerment theory, which is really looking at inequality and justice, where, especially in small to medium organizations, where you can involve your employees and get them to have a say in the way that things work, you'll find higher levels of engagement, and you'll find that this will add towards your set score. And then, of course, empowerment in leadership. So that is where, basically where you're increasing the motivation of your team. Through empowering leaders. Empowering leaders show 4 types of behaviors, which is really the emphasizing of the importance of work, the providing of decision-making participation, fostering the confidence in performance, and removing any bureaucratic constraints. So when you find that those 4 elements are all added together, that is when you get a high set score and a high level of employee engagement. So looking at that, there are your 4 main drivers of employee experience, which is namely your people, your leadership managers, team members, your culture, which is your vision and values, your organizational dynamics, your HR and people policy, and then your employee well-being, as well as your technology, which is your communication channels, your work management, payrolls and benefit softwares, time attendance and scheduling software, and then help desks and self-service portals, and your processes. So that's your onboarding, performance management, development, employee engagement, and exit interviews. These are your 4 main drivers of employee experience. And there are 4 things that you need to do as HR and leadership, and that is mapping your employee journey, which I promised you I will get to now. Identifying what great looks like for your organizations and which moments you want to focus on in that employee journey. The next thing you need to do is you need to use your data. You need to make it available to the people that have impact on the employee experience journey, but also to use it as continual measurement to see how the journey is performing and where you can improve. And then you need to evaluate the difference between those high impact moments that you've identified on the employee journey and what you have identified great to look like. And you need to take steps to fill the gap between those 2 places. So finally, now that I'm through the theory, the employee journey. We're going to look at the 6 main parts of the employee journey. So that is your hiring, your pre-onboarding, your actual onboarding, your day-to-day experiences, your employee changes, and then your offboarding. Let's start at hiring, right? So this is where your social exchange theory begins and is absolutely critical for your employee experience. It is a very, very overlooked part of the employee journey, but you have to have a look and say that your employee experience starts well before an employee actually steps foot in your organization. That's why you'll see on the journey that I showed on the previous slide, 50% of your employee experience and 50% of those moments sit in the onboarding space, onboarding and pre-onboarding space. That is basically where you create your brand ambassadors. So the first thing I want to look at is your job spec. When you're sending out a job spec, you need to have a look at the fact, are you speaking to your cultural fit and your employee experience? You should not be afraid to put your employee experience into your actual job specification and let everybody know what the culture's like, what they're going to be getting. And I'm not talking about necessarily, access to a foosball table. I'm talking about what is your culture? What can an employee expect when they're working there? Can they expect things like access to coaching, open door policies with their managers? Can they look at things where they are able to give and receive recognition? These are incredibly important aspects to employees, and this is where you're able to attract talent, is by giving them an idea of what type of a culture your organization actually is and what they will be experiencing and what the benefits are to them. You need to have a look at the communications that are happening during the recruitment process. Are you speaking to your potentials? Are you sending them great messages about what they can expect, what your process is like? And if they are not successful applicants, are you letting them know that they weren't? There is such a lot of talk out there in industry at the moment about this process, and it is absolutely key that from an employee experience perspective, this is addressed. When somebody applies to your organization, they are putting their hopes and dreams on the line effectively. you need to make sure that there is some kind of communication process that you are using, as you would with a customer. You need to look at your employees as your internal customers. And you wouldn't just leave a customer out there alone. You would be communicating with them during the process of them purchasing your product or getting a quote. So you need to have a look at this from an employee perspective and make sure that you are sending out communication about your business, about the process. And if they were unsuccessful, you need to send them a message to tell them that they were unsuccessful and that you hope to engage with them sometime in the future. This is where people, word of mouth, and your brand ambassadorship starts. It's incredibly important to focus on this area. The same with the interviews. How are you scheduling them? How are you giving them feedback, and how are you sending back the reviews? This is also another very important step in the hiring part of the employee journey, is that communication around the actual interviews. Was it successful? How long can they expect to wait until they hear back from you? And you must deliver on the promises that you make. If you say that you're going to get back to somebody within 7 days, you should do so. And let them know if you're unable to give them feedback at that time, still get hold of them and let them know that that feedback has been moved out for another couple of days. And then approval. What is the candidate approval process, and how do you trigger the onboarding experience? This is where you can have a look and say, okay, great, somebody is now joining our organization, and they are going to be coming into our pre-onboarding phase. What should they be receiving, and how can we trigger that? So this is where you can have a look at a digital touch point taking over from your actual physical, and you can start to look at an automated process to start to move everybody into the pre-onboarding space. When employees give feedback, if and when they leave an organization, and I'll give you some stats just now, most of them believe that their jobs were not adequately reflected in their initial description on their application. The details were skewed, the office culture was not clearly communicated, and this all became incredibly evident during the onboarding process. For many employees, this first experience ends up being the deal breaker because they did not know what they were getting into. And I think that this is where we as HR professionals can look and say, this is where we can spend some time, making sure that we are clearly communicating and managing the expectation of an employee before they join our organization, as well as attracting people with our set score. So we're looking at the other benefits. People are not always interested only in remuneration. They're also looking at other benefits, things like coaching, personal development. Those are incredibly, incredibly important and should be communicated in the actual job spec. So pre-onboarding, which is our next step 2. Yes, pre-onboarding is a real thing. So this is when you should be getting into contact with your new recruit. It's also a place where we have what we call white space between when an employee starts and they've actually been accepted for the job. This is where I'm going to liken it to getting a new car. So you know when you place your order at the dealership and before the actual car is delivered, you will open every single email and read every single SMS that you receive from that dealership because you are so excited about your new car. This is where the power of pre-onboarding sits. Before your employee joins, they are so excited about starting their new job. This is a great place to start to drip feed them communication around your culture and values, getting them to understand the organogram or the structure of your business. What brands are associated to the major parent brand? How does it all fit together? How do your departments look? Who are the key individuals in those departments? What information do you need to gather from your employee during this phase? You can make it really, really, really work hard for you. If you need them to complete forms, if you need that things copies of ID, etc. You can facilitate all of that paperwork and all of those touch points here in the pre-onboarding space, where everybody's nice and excited and they're not too overwhelmed like they generally are in their first week. You can have a look and you can say, okay, great. On day one, we want to start looking at culture. Day two, we want to examine the values. Now we want to get into the organograms. And then now we want you to start to give us your information. Something that's very important in this space is something I'm going to harp on a little bit. And that is about inclusivity and accessibility. You need to make sure that every employee that joins your organization has access to this. So what that means, if you're going to be using tech, it needs to be mobile friendly because a lot of your employees are going to be doing it on their phone. Okay, it must be mobile friendly. So if they need them to do documents, they need to be able to take a photo of the document from their phone and upload it. You need to ideally make it data free, especially if you are dealing with a large workforce. You need to make sure that there are no data costs or any barriers to entry that are limiting that employee from engaging with your organization. You also can have a look now at if there are choices that an employee needs to make before they arrive. So say, for example, you have different benefits that they need to choose between. This is a great time to let them review the difference between potentially the retirement fund and the provident fund, or the different types of medical aid. You can now provide the education that they need and give them the space to make these important decisions before they arrive at your organization. Once they've done all of this, we can now move into the actual onboarding, remembering that this is where, as with dating and as with job interviews, first impressions count. The MBHR actually found out that that 31% of new employees leave within the first 6 months. Now, this has as you'll all know, a very, very real rands and cents effect on your business. And why do a lot of those people leave? Well, reality did not match the sales pitch. So the car that arrived from the dealership was not the car that you test drove. There's a lack of equipment or process to take them through the onboarding experience. So it was basically a bad onboarding that actually made that 31% of people leave. So let's have a look. First of all, what communications and automations are being used? Again, I'm going to go back to the digital side. There's a lot of digital touch points that you can do here where you can start to make sure that your employee is not overwhelmed and that they are receiving the key pieces of information on the days that they need to do. Are you listening for feedback during this key period, and what feedback are you actually getting? So on day one, for example, I arrive at my new job and I don't have a desk and I don't have a laptop and IT hasn't made my login details yet. And I still, by day 3, have not received any of these items. I'm starting to get frustrated. How can I communicate that back to the people that need to hear it? How can I tell you that my onboarding is not going the way that I'd like it to go? We need to look at how you can have touch points here where you can send in quick pulses to see how is your onboarding experience. Do you have everything that you need? Have you met the key people that were given to you on your orientation plan? What else could we do to improve this onboarding experience for you? In an average new hire, they have to go through 54 activities on average. So some are a lot more than that to get to the 54 as an average. What can we send ahead of time, or how can you split this up? And then how is your training and mentoring being tracked? Are you seeing that somebody is going through an onboarding experience? Are they being able to give feedback on the fact where the mentoring sessions have actually occurred and the value of them? Is that something that your organization is looking at, and are you measuring it? And then what processes or workflows are in place to manage the onboarding issues? So if I have been notified about the problem with the desk and the laptop, what workflows can be triggered to notify other departments about the problems? And is this being tracked and measured so that you can see for future new recruits that onboarding is becoming a better process. Are you tracking it? Are you measuring it? Very, very, very key in this onboarding process. Okay, once everybody's been onboarded, we now start moving into the day-to-day part of the employee journey. And this is where we start to get to the really fun part, which is the culture, the recognition, and values. This is where we can start to look at places like sharing your success, sharing your learnings, and then continuous learning and development. Learning and development is not just about training. It's about upskilling as a person. It's about mentorship. It's about coaching. These are also things that you need to have in place, and you need to have a plan for on your employee journey. How are you empowering the people in your business by allowing them to work in the business and not just for the business? Now, what I mean by that is by looking at the employee journey and saying, once a person has been at my company for a certain amount of time, when can I start to use that person to help us in the business? I'm not talking about just them doing their job. I'm talking about them being able to contribute ideas and suggestions that will actually improve the company as a whole. We work with one Safari client, and their one driver that works in the workshops came up with a new way to park and move the vehicles between game drives, and ended up saving them over $100,000 in fuel when this was implemented across all of the lodges, just by the way that he moved the cars and got everybody to change the process of moving. So it's incredibly important to understand that your employees can add huge amounts of value to your business if you will let them. Even from a market research, from a marketing perspective, social media, your employees are sitting there as a massive resource that is available, that are dying to help the organization. You can launch campaigns in with them, get them to vote on things. You can get them involved in the CSI projects and get them to give their say. Rewards and recognition also play a huge part here. And then you need to have a look at how you are listening back to all the responses that are being given here. Again, the listening and the two-way communication is something that I'm going to emphasize again. There needs to be a plan for you to be listening and checking in with your employees all the time. And this is where we need to start measuring between where we want our key touch points to be and what the measurement is between where we are and the grade that we've envisioned. And then, are you making these aspects of employee experience available to all the employees? If you look at a large portion of activities and things that are given out in businesses, we see a large focus of them are only accessible by the people that work in head office or are sitting at the regional offices. You have to make sure that all your employees have access to the same employee experience. So again, onboarding, rewards, recognition, submission of ideas, these need to have places that they can go that are available to them on their phones and that do not cost them data, so that they can go on and actively engage with you as a brand. It sounds like something that is going to be very expensive, but it's something that is absolutely key to employee experience and something that is going to be driving success and performance within the business. Another thing around that, of course, is what you're offering your employees not only practical but fun, and not only fun but also practical? Are you providing them with places where they can go and they can partake in fun activities, where they can do their recognition and rewards, but also that they can have access to the practical aspects that they need to do their jobs? So continuous learning and development, their micro-learning pieces, how they can query their leave balance, how can they can get hold of you as HR, as compliance, as ethics, how can they get hold of IT, what forms do they need to complete? So all of these elements fall as part of the day-to-day. The next element that we're going to look at is employee changes. So this is where on your employee journey, these things are not set in stone. Your employee changes are where we've got something like COVID. It had to come up. It's just mandatory at this point in time that everybody that presents has to mention it. But yeah, this has obviously been a massive change. And I think that what we saw is, companies where their employees were highly engaged have managed to weather the storm, and the change is a little bit easier than those that weren't. This is also where you can be communicating with them about changes to their benefits, changes in jobs, changes in office moves or business directional changes. Again, communication out needs to have communication back in. How are we listening? How are we tracking? How are we seeing the sentiment that's being felt by employees at these times? I'm going to spend a little bit of time here around the listening. So if you want to be a true culture first company, you can't just do employee engagement surveys twice a year. You have to look at these events that we've been speaking about that are in the employee life cycle, and you have to ask for feedback at the right time with the right questions. This keeps the survey fatigue down to a minimum because it's personalized, it's relevant, and it's short, and it needs to get to the right people to be able to take action. I love this. This was done by Culture Amp, and I think this is absolutely spot on. You have to be looking at how you're actively listening. So the 3 things I would do to recommend that you fine-tune your listening in your employee engagement strategy is your timing, okay, your empathy and inclusion, and your transparency and follow-up. So your timing. Are your surveys short enough? Now, this is not a question that people get asked very often. They often get, are we covering everything? No. We need to have a look and we need to say, are your surveys short enough? So are you doing a quick pulse to see how people are feeling around a specific event that has just happened? So COVID happens, you move to working from home. How are you feeling about working from home? Is there anything that you need? Have you been in contact with your team? Are you feeling that you are able to continue to do your job, etc.? Right. 4 questions, and you're able to act on those responses. You need to then make sure that it's also targeted. So that's great for everybody who's working from home, but what about everybody that's still working on the front line? They should receive a completely different survey. Their survey should be, are you feeling safe? Do you have all the equipment that you need in order to perform your tasks safely? Is there anything else that you need? Are you getting the support that you need from your line managers to be able to effectively continue to do your job? And then empathy and inclusion. Are we looking at the specific experience of each employee? Is the timing, the format, and the tone of the surveys making them feel heard, cared for, and valued? What is the language that we're using to be able to communicate with all those different types of employees? And have we ensured that all the questions that we're doing are inclusive of employees from all types of different backgrounds? Are we looking at multi-language? Are we looking at different formats? Are we again considering things like how that message is being sent? Are we looking at all of the channels that we have available to us to be able to get the right message out to the right employee at the right time? And then this is the most important for me, is the transparency and follow-up. If I, as an employee, have told you how I feel, and I've told you where I am, and I've told you what's happening, and I've given you my ideas, how am I hearing back from you to understand that you've heard me? So feeding back from surveys is incredibly important. I want to know that you've heard what I say, because that is what conversation is all about. You speak, I speak, you speak, I speak. And I need to know that you've heard and understood what I said in order for me to speak again. Otherwise, I will just leave the conversation, and that is not what we want. So if your employees have given you great feedback, feedback to them. Thank you. Thank you for telling us that you do not feel that you have what you need. We are working on it with our operations team, and I will check back in with you and update you within the next 24 hours. That is communication. That is speaking back. Too often, businesses are holding back information because they're not sure, or they haven't yet got it signed off or finalized. I totally get that. And I know that we have to go to our employees with things that are factual and things that are true. But that that space where nobody's saying anything is damaging. We need to look at how we fill that space with telling people that we are waiting for the answer. We haven't got clarity on XYZ issue yet, but we are hoping to have it in the next 48 hours. We will keep you updated. Please bear with us. That is communication. It doesn't have to be sharing things that you're not sure of yet, but we do have to be communicating so that people know what's happening, even if what's happening means waiting. I hope that makes sense. And then we need to tell them what actions we've taken. So, you know, everybody fed back and they told us that they don't have what they need for personal protective equipment, and that the personal protective equipment will be available in the next 2 days, and this is how you get it. Again, just feeding back, total transparency, what is happening, very important for employees to know. At the same time, on your changes and on your day-to-day, this is where performance management comes in as well. So HR owns 60% of the total touch points in an employee experience journey, but managers own 97% of the critical touch points, and most often through performance management. So I'm putting this up there as a data checkpoint. If you are seeing that your performance management is trending downward, so that is if a large percentage of your employees are failing to meet performance standards, this is a big red flag. And you should launch deeper investigation to figure out which parts of the employee experience are causing obstacles for employees. And using this engagement data and continuous listening, you can then provide more insights and context as to what's happening in this part of the employee journey. So, for example, a manager could be creating like a toxic work environment, or even maybe a legacy technology system is affecting the employee's ability to hit their goals. It's not always clear exactly what the issue is, but, I mean, obviously it's going to be different at every single one of your organizations. But if you take a holistic approach to the sources of performance and engagement data coming in, you're much likely to get fast answers. So again, that is taking a look at a data checkpoint of saying, if your performance management flags are going down and there's a downward trend, this is a part where you need to quickly intervene, and you need to be asking your pulse data and your active listening to check what part of the employee experience is failing here, and you'll be able to come up with a nice quick solve, hopefully. So the last part that we're going to look at from an employee journey is the offboarding. And this again is something that it kind of makes or breaks your brand ambassador for life. So I'm not sure if you've ever seen a movie called Anchorman, but in the words of Ron Burgundy, keep it classy, San Diego. That is what we're looking for in an offboarding experience. We're looking to keep it nice and classy. First off, we're going to look to communicate that change and arrange the knowledge transfer within the business. So if somebody's leaving, chances are pretty much everybody knows. It's important that there's communication. We tell everybody that there's going to be a change and that we are arranging the knowledge transfer. We then need to look at our exit interview process. You know, a formalized offboarding process not only mitigates your legal and security threats in a business, but also helps gain honest feedback from your employees on where to improve your organization. And it can also woo a stellar boomerang employees to return in the future. So I think in terms of your exit interviews, this is where you can really get insights into the employee journey and the employee experience that they've had at your organization so far. You can also recognize the contributions that individual has made to the business. And I think that that's really something that's overlooked. You know, this person has given a lot of time and a lot of their love and passion to your organization, and recognition at this point is important. You can then go into the more nitty-gritty stuff, which is your system access and recovery. How are you handling this? You know, what is that process like for the employee? somebody who's worked at your business for 5 years and they hand in their resignation, and the first piece of communication they receive back is your passwords have all been revoked and I want you to drop off your laptop. That is effectively taking the last 5 years and ruining the employee experience that you spent so long building. The person feels so, they feel insulted, or they feel upset at this point, and basically we've undone all the hard work. So it's really important that this process is handled well. Again, from a legal compliance perspective, we need to you need to handle all the paperwork. There's some exiting documentation that needs to be done. This can all be done in a really, really positive fashion that leaves this person walking out your door feeling positive about your organization and about the way that they left. You can then have some fun, have some parties, but remembering to leave the door open so that that employee can return and that they feel that they are able to return. Because this is where your word of mouth and people will pass on and say, I worked here for 5 years, I got another opportunity, I left, but man, I would recommend that you always keep looking at their careers portal, because that is a fantastic organization to work for. And yeah, now time for the fun part, hopefully, which is the Q&A. It is a little strange not being able to see people's faces while you're talking, I must say. It's a bit of a different experience.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much for that, Sally. Very quickly, guys, just before we carry on with the Q&A, I'm just going to put a very quick poll up in the chat, which I'm going to publish now, asking, has your organization earmarked budget for improving the employee experience? Yes, my business sees it as valuable. No, I haven't got the buy-in yet. And I think budget would be allocated given sufficient motivation. I'm just going to give everyone about another 30 seconds. If you can please complete that, and then we'll get some comment from Sally afterwards. The answers are coming through, and it looks very, I would say 50-50, but it's 33, 33, 33. It's all seems rather equal at the moment. But yeah, let's just keep those coming through, and I will end it in about another 10 seconds.
Jeez, it really is like neck and neck.
It really is neck and neck, huh? Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to end the poll. Okay, so at the moment, we are literally sitting. 35% of you say, yes, my business sees it as valuable. 33% say, no, I haven't gotten the buy-in yet. And 31% of you say, I think budget would be allocated given sufficient motivation. Sally, your comments on that?
To be honest, this is, if I look at industry and I look at our experience, this is pretty much where we are. What I'd actually like to do, Nick, if it's okay with you, is I'd like to offer, if we can maybe send a template through next week for everybody that's attended, which would be how to get buy-in from C-suite and how to look at positioning employee experience, because I think it is something that's often difficult to get buy-in from business. So I hope that would be helpful. But if everyone would like, then we could send that through next week via yourselves. Yeah,
absolutely. No problem at all. I'll coordinate that with you. And then everyone who has attended today will receive that during the course of next week, together with any answers that we didn't manage to get through today. Cool. Okay, cool. So just something from my side, Sally. Are we seeing the growth of employee experience as a division?
That's a good question. Yes, in some places we are, but what I'm seeing more and more is that employee experience is being set up in a business as cross-functional teams. So we're seeing people that are coming from HR, people that are coming from compliance, from ethics, internal comms, and from IT, setting up highly functional teams to actually manage employee experience, because employee experience is not just an HR function. It's it comes from multiple disciplines. In the same way that customer experience would be a part of marketing, sales, operations. So employee experience doesn't just fall to HR, it falls to the entire business. And of course, it needs to come from the top. Employee experience needs to be a business priority, as customer experience needs to be.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. And one more from my side. If a company is going to prioritize one aspect of the employee experience, what would you suggest it is?
If a company is going to do one thing and one thing only, it would be to open up the two-way conversation. So to have a way that employees can feedback regularly, so that active listening that I was going on and on about, that would be my number one thing, is invest in active listening with your employees. So a way that they can feedback on important issues, keep it short, keep it sweet, and let people know what you've done about it. That would be absolutely first tier for me.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So let's check on some of the questions by the guys that have joined today. So we have got one here from Zoe. Saying employers sometimes start an employee experience drive and then lose interest, putting all the work put in by HR to waste and possibly damaging the employee's experience further. What do you recommend? I think what I recommend there is that is you actually need to educate C-suite to understand that employee experience is not a campaign. It's not a marketing initiative that gets done once a year. Employee experience starts from before they join your organization to the time that they leave. It is an ongoing investment, and I mean, I'm not just talking a financial investment. I'm talking more about it's an investment in the actual teams to give the time. Your teams need to be able to have time where they sit down and strategize and actually measure data on employee experience. And I think that's where the difficulty comes in, is everybody expects it to be almost like a gimmicky campaign, which it isn't. It's actually an ongoing strategic initiative by the business. Cool. Thank you. We have, going back to some of your first points, we have Kevin Marlowe who asks, does holding an employee accountable and responsible form part of SET? Yes, I would put that more in their perceived organizational support. I mean, which is one of the pillars of SET. They need to be accountable and responsible, and they need to see that as a way that the company is caring for them, because that's giving them responsibility in their actual job. So yes, I agree with that. I think that it is. Okay, cool. Thank you. Let's see what else we have. A question from Chantal Buerta saying, what South African brand has the best employee experience that, let's say, compares with someone like Zappos? Zappos, I don't know if I said that correctly. Sure, Zappos, yeah, they are kind of the poster child for the great employee experience. Sure, that's a tough one, Chantal. Sure, which I'm not privy to everybody's one. I must give a shout out. Obviously, they're clients of mine, but I must tell you that the Massmart Walmart group do a pretty good job on their employee experience. I think
think a couple of the mining companies as well. And then I think that South Africans do very well in the hospitality space as well. There's a great culture of continuous learning in the hospitality space, especially in the restaurant chains. We've seen quite a lot of great employee experience where people are able to give in a lot of suggestions and get actively involved. So I would hesitantly go with more like I think we do well in retail. I think we do well in hospitality. I think those are the two areas where I've really seen great employee experiences.
Cool. Thank you. We have Karen asking, what do you recommend to an organization who doesn't have someone focused in or on HR?
An HR. Okay, I would. Okay, so then we're looking at. We're looking at
a smaller organization. Sorry. I would presume yeah.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, if you don't have somebody that's focused on HR, employee experience is then generally being driven by your directors, and they would then need to appoint somebody that's looking more at it from an internal comms perspective. So there's absolutely no reason why SMEs can't have a great employee experience driven purely by the directors and perhaps a responsible person in marketing that could take on an internal comms role. A lot of employee experience is, especially if it's being handled by a smaller team, is a lot easier to deliver than in a large corporate. You have the tools generally set up that don't cost a lot, and it's quite easy to engage with that employee one-on-one. So your communication channels are generally better. So yeah, I would say assign somebody from marketing perhaps to take on an internal comms function and get buy-in from leadership.
Cool, thank you. We have one from Linda Roos asking, is there value in giving candidates, positively framed, feedback about the interview itself, i.e. how they did in the interview?
I believe so. I mean, if we're looking at your organization and saying your organization has a culture of learning and development and self-improvement, then that should be evident at all levels. So if a candidate has applied, I think it is great to give them feedback and tell them where they went, where they did really well and where perhaps there are areas for improvement. I mean, you don't know what you don't know. So it is important to get the feedback, and then even if you were an unsuccessful candidate, at least you know in your next interview what you could do better at, which would improve your chances of getting a new job. I mean, I think that's hugely valuable, as long as you say, it's positively framed and the intention behind it is good. I think that's great.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And what else? We have from a familiar sounding name, John Dean. He asks, which is a bigger motivator for employees, tangible or intangible benefits, sorry.
Okay. That's a good question. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what we implemented at Talk, just because I think it demonstrates something. So Talk is not a massive company. We're an SME, and a few years ago, we realized that we were not able to offer the bigger salaries that some agencies and consultancies were offering. So we had a very hard look at our employee benefits, and we started to look at something which our employees, for example, have limitless leave, so they can take as much leave as they want, provided that their jobs and their projects are up to date. So we looked at moving to an output-based system rather than a system of attendance. Our employees are also given a mandatory 4-day weekend once a month, where they have to be off for the Friday and the Monday, and their login rights are revoked for that time, so that they actually cannot log in, and they're given more time off. So, people like to, obviously the bigger salaries and the bigger benefits packages are great. But a lot of people, you know, also Talk is remote. So 3 days a week they work from home. They have always done, and 2 days a week we get together at the office. And for a lot of people, the flexibility of being able to choose how they run their lives and being able to go watch their daughter play netball and attend things is more valuable than you know, an extra $5,000 on their salary. For other employees, it doesn't work that way. So I think, again, the best thing to do is to actually find out what is important to your employees and what do they see as benefits, because that's often where you can find a really sweet spot between actual remuneration and intangible benefits.
Cool, perfect. Thanks, Sal. Really cool question from Karen, asking or saying, employee experience has been a topic of discussion for some time now. Why do you believe we are still having these discussions of getting buy-in from leaders?
Oh man, you know, when I first started in this and I used to go to boardrooms and I used to tell people I worked in employee experience, everybody looked at me like I was just trying to sell them like precious stones for putting on their desk or something. Yeah, I think it's because you know, people are still not looking at it, employees, that they refer to them as human capital, but they don't understand that capital is actually a financial term. And you know, your human capital basically means your people money. Your employees generate your revenue, they drive your revenue, they drive your profit. And it is still a little bit of a mystery to me why we're still having these conversations. But I think it really comes down to the fact that that a lot of businesses can't see the rands and cents value in employee experience. And that's why I say that what's really important about the employee journey is the measurement aspect and the data aspect, because you have to actually be able to show how the employee experience is improving and driving profit and performance. Because once you can show that to the business case for employee experience becomes a lot easier to sell. Because people then understand, okay, cool, if I'm doing X, then we're producing Y. Or if we're not spending the time in hiring, pre-onboarding and onboarding, and we're losing employees, what that costs in terms of churn. If you take your payroll and you take 31% of that payroll amount and you replace that amount on a churn basis every 6 months, and you start to work out what that's costing your company, then it starts to make a really, really good, the sentence is going to come back. It starts to make a lot of sense as to why you should be investing the time up front to retain those employees.
Okay, awesome. I think we've got time for one more question. I will ask Varishka. Varishka asks, what active communications tools would you recommend?
Active communication, sure. Depends what IT will allow you. I would definitely have a look at. It depends on the size of your organization. I would look at an employee portal with potentially with SMS, email, app notifications if you've got a large workforce that's spread out around the country, because that's easy to offer as data-free solution. If you have a smaller workforce or you've got a lot of teams and not necessarily the budgets for employee portals and that type of thing, certainly a centralized location where everybody can get their essential documents and things that they need to actually be able to do their job is essential. And then, to be honest, I'm a big fan. I would look at Slack. I love it. It's a great tool. You can accomplish a lot with it, especially as a remote working tool. There are a lot of automations and communications that you can build in there that don't cost you anything, that can emulate the in-office environment for remote workers. So I would definitely have a look at that if you guys are not into the portal side.
Great. Well, cool. Thanks so much, Sally. I've just gone to your final slide that just has some of your details there. Again, this will all be sent out shortly after the session with the recording, and you've also got you can catch up on Sally's details there. If not, you can send us some messages, and we'll happily put you in touch with Sally. Sally, thank you so much. I just want to finish off on our side. Thanks to say thank you to everyone for joining us today. Next week, we have the employee benefits and COVID-19, a survey results revealed. This is hosted by Sanlam. And then on the 16th of July, this is in the afternoon, we have Take Back Control of Your Training Strategy with someone from Standard Bank, as well as the guys from Degreed. You can also check out any of our upcoming events on the CHRO website, which is chro.co.za/events. Again, thank you to Sally for her time, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. We will catch you hopefully next week. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.